Hello and welcome back to Fully Booked, the Hidden Gems author podcast, which Craig Tuck and myself, Roland Hume, chat some of the interesting figures and leading lights of this crazy industry of writing and self-publishing. And before we begin, I just want to remind you that if you're a self-published author and you're looking for help with your covers or your blurbs, your editing or your advertising, we have a whole suite of services that we offer you that can help you. So be sure to check those out. They're in the description down below. But moving on, we are welcoming back today a very special guest, someone we are so happy to see returning, Dave Chesson, often known as Kindlepreneur. How are you doing today, Dave? It is great to have you back.
Oh, it's always good to be back. Thank you for having me.
No, we are very, very grateful to have you. And I'm excited to hear about your new office that you're going to be moving into. It looks
Yes, as anybody who's seen the video of this or so can see that I'm kind of sitting in a closet right now. The problem about building out a new office is that we still don't have the sound panels in, and that can create an echoey. So I put myself in this closet until then, but it's really nice to be able to work on your office space. As we authors all know, our office space or where we write is one of those key critical moments. It's about putting the things that, you know, invigorate you, and then surrounding yourself in a kind of like, I don't know, a sanctuary that makes it even better for the writing. And so, you know, you got to work on that bit by bit. And by the way, I always love Craig, you know, and seeing your background, I'm like looking and like, oh, what's on those shelves there? That's really cool.
It's all Lego.
Is that a Terminator, by the way?
There's a Terminator up there. It's total Lego. You know, the head like moves back and forth, the eyes light up.
Oh,
but yeah, I'm a Lego freak.
Well, no, and Dave, you normally have your backdrop is normally like so good it makes the rest of us feel bad. So I'm very grateful today for this. But anyway, moving on, we wouldn't be here without the man himself, Craig Tuck, the owner and founder of Hidden Gems. How are you doing today, Craig?
Doing great. Thanks, Roland. And again, yes, thanks, Dave, for coming back. We love having you on because you are always at the top of, you know, building out the best and newest things that authors need. You have your finger on the pulse of what the community of self-publishers, authors need in the world. And you know, as a writer yourself and working with writers, you know what makes what is needed to make us all succeed, and then you build it out. And Publish a Rocket is something that we've talked a lot about, and I use myself, Roland uses. And then, of course, Atticus is what we're here to talk about today. And that is sort of your, what you built to allow authors to, put their books together. In some ways, I think of it often as an answer to Vellum, right? But I think it's more than that even. So I wanted to make sure that everyone knows what Atticus is, because I know it's only launched. It hasn't been that long, I don't think, since it like officially launched. Maybe a year. Is it a year even?
Maybe 2.
2 years?
Maybe
okay,
2.5,
yeah. Because I remember when we first talked about it, it was sort of like it had come out, but it was in beta or something like that, and so we weren't ready to discuss it. And then I don't know, I guess time slipped by. So let us discuss it. Why don't you start us off by telling us what it is, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah, well, I guess the best way to tell what it is why it came about. So as an author for years here, I've been one who's used so many different programs just to create my book, right? I was personally a Scrivener fan. And so I wrote, not only did I write my books, I wrote my master's thesis on that thing. But then when I wanted to work with my editor, I'd have to export it into Word, and then I'd have to email back and forth with my editor, because they'd have their copy, and then, maybe they break it up. But the point though is it was this giant cat and mouse game. And all of a sudden I had version control issues, because let's face it, I don't know about you guys, but I always say final copy and then final, this is the final, all caps final. Yeah. And all of a sudden, like I did once, by the way, publish the wrong final. I sent the wrong file to the formatter, and the formatter formatted it. And then I found out that it was missing like an entire chapter, and that's completely on me. But I thought I looked it over enough. And so you have this version control. And by the way, we don't delete the finals. We almost keep them all. I don't know about you, but I still got 20 of the finals in one file. And then finally, and if you're working with a formatter, that's one thing. Or if you're working with a software that does formatting, now you put it into that. And I used to use one way back in the day called Judo. And Judo is very archaic at this point, but it did the trick. So here I was, to write a book, I was using Scrivener, I was using Word, and I was using Judo just to do it. And it was because of this that I wanted to create Atticus, because I hated having to learn 3 different systems. I disliked not being in control of where my book is, or the version history, or the version control. And then I didn't like that I had to master Scrivener and then master Judo, or other formatting software out there. And I wanted to create one spot. I wanted to create something where if Scrivener, Google Docs, and Vellum got together and had a baby, its name would be Atticus. And I say those because my original dream was to have it that I could write in it, I could collaborate in it. Okay, so that's why I say Google Docs, because Google Docs is great to work at real time. It's got limitations, but so be it. And then I could design beautiful books inside of it as well. Now, when we launched it, way back in the day, it was just formatting, and really it was a formatting software, that gave you the ability to build beautiful nonfiction and fiction books, with all of the features that people are used to. At the time, there's Vellum, and Vellum was like, was it $249.99 for both ebook and book. It only worked on PC.
Mac only, right?
Yep, and only on Mac. So all the PC authors, like either A, they were SOL, sold out of luck, or they would go buy a Mac, or they do a Mac and cloud system that's a subscription and just kind of do this sort of janky way just to be able to use the program. So we said, okay, let's start with that. And so what we did was we built exactly that, but it works on Mac and PC, and it's already $100 cheaper just for that. But then we started, after we came out with that, we then started to add writing. So now there's a lot of, drag and drop chapters, creating special chapters, templates, forms. There's a lot more that we can do there. I wouldn't say that Atticus at this moment is as good as Scrivener. It's definitely a lot easier to use, that's for sure. But there's a lot more that we're going to be coming out with that will make the writing experience that much better. And then just recently we came out with collaboration, which allows you to bring in an editor, and it allows you to work with another writer and write together. And so now, as it stands, you can write your book, you can work with your editor, and you can format without ever having to take it out of the system. And what's really key is that we have a lot more to go. And when we come out with new features and capabilities, we make it free for the authors. So it's not like one of those pay as you go, or it's not like, okay, it's a one-time fee and you get all those benefits. And that's one of the things I love about it too, is I've never been a fan of subscriptions, especially as an author. I don't like the idea of paying, a monthly fee just to have access to the software I use to write all my books. And so we wanted to make it's a one-time cost. You get all of those capabilities, and it just keeps getting better and more features as we go. And so that's a little bit of a long-winded way, but it's really explaining why it was built and how it really places itself in the market.
I don't think people appreciate not having a subscription model enough, because I just did my taxes and I looked through the amount I paid in subscriptions last year to stuff like Adobe and things. And what I love about Kindle KDP Rocket, or Publisher Rocket as it's known now,
yeah,
I bought it one time, and every time it gets updated, I get the new updates. And some of the stuff that it does now is incredible. Like, yeah. And so, yeah, there's the fact that when you're speaking my language now, I'm like, this seems like the perfect time to get in on a tool like this, which is going to bring more features in, and you get access to all those features just for owning it.
Exactly. And that's the thing that I love about it too, is I love to run the companies like I love companies to treat me. I don't want to feel like my writing's held ransom. Okay. And it's not. Most of the companies that have these subscriptions, like, look, if you stop paying them, they give you an ability to remove your writing. So I get it. But also, that was my work area. That was my canvas. That's like somebody taking away your art studio and your canvases and saying, well, you can still take the pictures you wrote, but like, you got to get out. It just feels, I don't like it. So that's why I've stuck with the whole, hey, it's a one-time cost. You own that art studio. You own that canvas. You continue to build as you want. And I think that's just how I like to operate. And the second thing too is I've never liked it when somebody's like, okay, well, I improved the program, now you've got to pay for it again. And then I don't know. I love to create as an author. I keep running into things and I say to myself, wouldn't it be nice if, and I'm like, great. I just go get the programmers like, hey guys, we need to build this because this is going to be great. This makes life easier. And building something that is as capable as it is takes a very long time. And this is one of those things where we're always going to be constantly adding and improving. This isn't something where, like with Scrivener hasn't come out with a new version or update in like what, 7 years? They came out with an update for Mac first, and that might have been like 8-9 years. And then it was like 2 years later when they finally updated the PC version. I think this is something where, adding and improving at all times is really key.
Yeah, I think a lot of these companies come out with these things, especially when they're the first ones to do it, and then they just sort of sit back on their laurels and just collect their money. And the newer people like you come along and realize that this no longer meets the needs of the market. And I think that what you're doing is, by putting all that stuff in, to me, it makes a lot of sense. And it's sort of one of the frustrations I have, let's say, with the video game industry, right? Where they come out with a video game, and it used to be when I was a kid, you'd go to the store, you'd buy your video game on CD or floppy disk or whatever, and that would be the game, and you'd play the game, and the full game was there, right? Now, you buy the game, but then you got to buy the DLC, and then you got to get the expansion packs, and then you got to buy this and that. It's like they don't come out with that full game anymore. And I get it, because like you said, it takes a long time to develop stuff. And if you were to wait until the program was completely finished, it would never come out, or it would take forever. So, but people shouldn't have to pay for that, right? So I think that is a really good model that you're doing there. So and I'm sure that other authors would appreciate that as well. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and it's also one of those things too where there's just continuous run-on costs. We authors spend we might have like 2 great months of writing, and then like 3 months that we miss it. Then there's that remorse of, oh no, I just spent 3 months paying for something I didn't even use. And no, it's to me that kind of anxiety and everything. Like me as a writer, I just don't want to think about it. I want to know that I own the system that I write in, and know that it will always be there. And I think that's kind of the key. And the other thing too that I really like about it is you're only learning one software. You're not learning 3. You're not learning all these systems or anything. There's the one. And I think that that's a really key component too. I always joked around that on Scrivener, it was like there were courses being sold that were like 3 times to like 5 times more than the cost of the software just to teach people how to use it.
Yeah.
If that's not telling. And so now you got to learn that, which by the way, I used it for years. And I even paid for one of those courses after like 4 or 5 years just to learn it even more so. And I realized, oh, wow, there's a lot of things I didn't even know it could do. And I've been using it for a long time. Wait, where's that feature? And I would like forget how to find this thing, and that was just, I think, kind of problematic. So we wanted to make something very intuitive, very, clean. And that's something that as a software designer, it's really hard to do that, because you want to add features, but what you don't want to do is make it more complex. And I think that there's that fine balance of everything is where it should be. I have 2 rules in my company when we design, and for lack, I've never come up with a really cool phrase for this. Okay, so you're just going to have to hear the really dumb phrase, but I call it click, and I call it brain calories. Okay, click is my code to my team, where I'm like, hey, if I have to click twice to get to something that's important, that's too many clicks. Okay. And so sometimes we might hide something. It's like, well, you got to go to settings, and then you go into settings, and then you got to go here, and then here's this really important button. I'm like, whoa, that's already 2 clicks to get to an important button. Let's rethink that. The second thing that I do is called the brain calories. So sometimes, like when we're working with authors, especially in beta, or when we're just designing ourselves, I like to ask myself, like, all right, was the button naturally where you thought, or did you have to like pause and search around and think about where the button was? Because if that's the case, that's too many brain calories. And so we really try to streamline these 2 things so as to make it aesthetic, beautiful, not cluttered, but absolutely capable.
I love that.
You always want to make things easier. That is one of the things that we hear about from authors, the most with self-publishers, is all the different things they have to do, all the different steps, all the things they have to learn, all the different programs that they have to do. And anytime you can bring something together to create one system that does it all and makes it easy, that is going to be a winner for sure. And that was the whole reason why I had started Hidden Gems a decade ago, was when I was writing and I was working with talking to other authors, and we were trying to get reviews, and we were all doing it manually at that point. And the number of steps you had to do, the number of things you had to learn, and the number of different aspects of it, that it was so difficult. And coming from a product design background, I used to work as a product designer for Oracle. I said, okay, and I built it for myself. I put together a program, and I used to be a developer as well, and I put together a program that allowed me to do it really easily. And then I told other authors about it, and they're like, oh, can you help me with that? And then I just realized, oh, I can turn this into a business. And so I completely understand that perspective, and then that is, in my opinion, how everybody should work, right? That's the way Apple used to be, where they were really good at making everything so easy to use. You wouldn't need a manual, right? They've gotten away from that a little bit, but yeah, that is the beauty of good design, is making it intuitive, so you don't need an instruction manual.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really hard to do that. And that's really where I think the secret sauce to things are. You can either have something that's very easy to use, but it's also not capable, or you have something that's really hard to use, but it has all the things in the world. Now, sometimes you're going to design software where you have to do that. I mean, case in point, to use InDesign to format a book, okay, that is a very capable, like InDesign, Adobe InDesign is a great software. It really is. It needs to be super complex because it has like an infinite amount of things it can do. You can build magazines, you can build a book, you can do these. Now, that being said, though, is that I think a program like that, all right, if you as an author want to learn how to do that, you definitely need courses on how to do that. And you need to devote a lot of time. But again, on the counterpoint of it, it's not to knock Adobe. Adobe's great, but Adobe is almost a true professional software. You almost got to get certified to be able to use the thing, because it can do so many things. It could build a book. It could build this. It could do that. It could, there's a million options. And yes, taking the time to really learn that. But a mass majority of authors are not wanting to spend that kind of time to learn how to use a program like Adobe. Instead, they want something that can help them, regardless of age, regardless of technical ability, be able to build a book they're proud of, and not have to spend 10, 20, 30 hours basically going back to school. So you want to try to find that sweet spot where it's all the capabilities of your market, of us authors, that we need, but put in a way where it's very easy. It's what you see is what you get. How you interact with the book is exactly how it's going to look when your reader opens it up. Like, these kind of things make it so much better for authors.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that that the program lacks complexity and can't do a lot of fancy stuff. And you might it doesn't mean that you don't need courses on how to optimally use it, right? But you shouldn't need courses on how to find the features on how to use it. It should be, this is a course on, this is like the best practice to get the most out of it, as opposed to how do I even use it in the first place.
Absolutely. I would say, just in formatting a book, if somebody has their book inside of Atticus, you could literally have your book formatted looking great in a matter of minutes just by using a template and a couple of subtle changes. But then, and we make it streamlined like that for authors. However, though, if you want to go that next level and you want to create like full image bleeds, on your chapter pages between two pages, or you want to put special system, or you want text message, to look like text bubbles as people are, if you want it, there's so many other things you can do. Now, the cool part is we put it where those things are in their place, and it doesn't stop the regular author from building something quick and beautiful, right? It's not like those things impede your ability to format. I think that's kind of where it's set up. That's why the click is, hey, the click is, if I want to format a good looking book and quickly, I'm not going to have to click, 3 times to get to this necessary thing, right? These things will be laid out for me in a, step. Now, if I want to go detail and I want to do something really crazy cool, I can go watch this video that shows me exactly how to do that. And now I might click an extra to get to that feature, to then do this and then implement that. And that's kind of, I think, where the secret sauce is that you have to design things where for the normal user, they're not impeded. And for the advanced users that want to spend the time to learn a bit more, those features are then offered to them, in the most efficient manner.
Yeah. I think about I'm not really much of a graphic designer, but there are times where I need to do some kind of graphic design. So I don't have, Photoshop, but I know that GIMP is a free, version basically of Photoshop. It does a lot of the same things. So, I downloaded that, and then this was a couple weeks ago, I needed to do something. It's like, I couldn't even figure out how to draw like a line, like everything. It was so complicated. I ended up going to ChatGPT and saying, hey, how do I do this? And it would give me all the steps on how to do it, right? But it was like a lot of steps to do what I thought should be very simple things. And there's just so much, it's so involved. There's so many different things, right? And you don't want to overwhelm people with that and keep all that stuff hidden. So to me, it's like, the fact that you're concentrating on making it usable, especially for authors who are very much about, I just want to write my book and not worry about all this other stuff. I don't want to learn all these other things. I just want to write. You want to keep it as simple as possible and as user-friendly as possible. So that's great. Okay, so how does this all work? Okay, so you get Atticus. Can you just jump in and start writing your book, or are we saying, you want to first write it maybe in Word and then import it? Where do we go?
You can do both. The biggest thing is that you can take your Word file and you can drag and drop it in. There's steps that we recommend you do to your Word file just to make it easier. For drag and drop. So like, for example, if you're using H2 header 2s for your different chapters, our system will sense that and immediately break it into a chapter automatically inside the system. Or you could just drag and drop the whole thing in, even if it's a giant block of text, and then you can click a button, separate chapter with one button, and it will start to separate out the chapters just like that. If you have page breaks, we have like if you do 3 asterisks or stars, it'll then automatically make it a page break. But it will import your bold, your italics. If you have an image, it will import the image automatically. These sorts of things are already kind of taken care of. And now you have it. Or, like I said, if you are starting from scratch, you can open up a new book. You can start writing chapters, adding them, drag and dropping in images and that sort of thing.
So I was going to ask a tactical question. I mean, you say this is a tool that you buy one time and you're done. Where do your book files get hosted? Because if you're sharing them with an editor or a beta reader or something like that, where do they get hosted so you can do that? Yeah.
So we actually have the best of both worlds on this. What I love about it, because of our collaboration capability, we host them on a server that's fully protected and encrypted. And that makes it so that, there's no problem there. But what's great about this too, is that if you have it on your computer, let's say, for example, you had your Word file on your computer and you pour a glass of wine on your computer and it's toast, so is your Word.
It's like you know me.
Yeah. Well, it's funny as I say that because when my 13-year-old, who she's now 13, but when she was 1.5, I had my laptop and I was drinking a glass of wine. I was holding her, and next thing you know, she, nothing's faster than a 2-year-old's, grit reaction, and she went and I stopped her and it went right on my computer and I lost a book that I was 90% of the way through. So I speak out of pain on that one. But the cool thing too is you can also download a backup copy of your book as well onto your computer as a JSON file. And so now what you can do is you can have copies of your book on your main computer as well as copies saved on the server, so you get the best of both worlds, which is nice.
So it's cloud-based now, right, Atticus?
It is cloud-based. So what's kind of funny is it's called a PWA, Progressive Writing App. And I love PWAs. I think PWAs are going to be the future of programming. And really what it is it's sort of a hybrid between a downloadable program and a cloud-based program, okay? So what you can do with Atticus is you can always go to app.atticus.io and log into your account and use it. So let's say, for example, you're at Aunt Gertie's house and you totally forgot your computer, but man, you got like 3 hours to get some writing done. You can go to her computer, go to app.atticus.io, brings it up in a web browser. You can totally write, do your things, all the things, good to go. Or you can also download a copy onto your computer. And it will show up like an icon, everything. You click it, it's got its own window, and it connects with the server, updates automatically as you go. So you can either use it on a web browser or you can use it as a PWA software. And that way it's the software of yours. Now, what's really cool too is that the program will operate without the internet, okay?
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right. So here's what's really cool. The only time that you need internet is A, when you log into your account for the first time so it can download, and B, when you actually go to export your file, okay? So we store the engine on our server, okay, for all the compiling and all that craziness, okay? So it's not a load on your computer. The second thing is that the moment that I go to hit to export, it goes to the compiler and the cruncher and it turns it and it sends you the file just like that. So what I can do as an author is I can log into my Atticus, I can jump on a plane, I can get all my writing done, do whatever. And then the moment that I connect with the internet, it will update the servers, you know, updating what's up there. And again, you can export your file. Now, for any authors that are thinking, whoa, what if I'm in the woods and I need to export a file? I'm like, okay, if you don't have internet connectivity, what are you doing with that file when you export it? So it shouldn't be too much of a problem in that respect. You can still create a Word document without the internet. What it is formatting it into an EPUB or a PDF.
So if you were going to be offline for a certain amount of time, just so I understand, you're able to have the software on your system and continue working on it, and it just won't update to the server until you connect later. And then
That's right.
You wouldn't be able to create the files until you do that connection.
That's correct. You wouldn't
Right.
be able to collaborate with somebody at the same time
Right.
because you don't have the internet.
Right.
But you can also do manual backups of your book as well. Just in case you're like worried, you can download a JSON file of that file as you go. Just making sure in case that's something you're worried about. But the moment that you reconnect, everything's in sync. And you can go back to collaborating with somebody, or you can also go to export an EPUB at that moment. But all your work's there.
And when you're collaborating, let's say it was in real time and two people are sort of working on one doc at once and you're both connected, obviously. So how would that work?
So we have a system where you can lock a chapter, and we highly recommend that if you're collaborating with another writer at the same time. The key is you'll want to lock a chapter so that that person doesn't come in and you both write two chapters at the same time, and that would be a little bit messy. That's one of the precautionary systems that we have.
Do you have version control as well?
We have version control. The version control, though, I think is going to be infinitely better here in a couple of months because we have the ability for, right now, there's the manual ability where you can do and what I mean by version control, we're talking about version history, reverting back to version history.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I recommend at this point is just do a backup of the file at the point, and then you can continue to write. And if you want to reinstall the old version, just send it into our system. It's not the most optimal at this point, but what we will be coming out with in a couple of months here is that you will be able to see a whole bunch of versions, and you'll be able to click and then see the difference between the old version and the new version and whatever changed, and then choose the one that you want and go back to it.
Brilliant.
Like track changes in Word or whatever, right?
Yep.
If you hadn't locked something down, let's say, and you're offline and working on something, and then someone else worked on that same thing, and then you came and you went and to upload, is it going to notice sort of those I forget the word for it, where where the two of them have you change something and then they change that same thing? Is it going to notify you that there are conflicts?
So what would end up happening is that the system would come into play, and all of a sudden, as it goes to sync, so let's say your work. Now, I'm assuming that the chapter already exists. Okay.
Right.
So not like you went and wrote a chapter and they wrote a chapter at the same time, because that makes it a lot easier. Because if you both wrote a chapter at the same time, then they just kind of take the two writings, and there they are, segregated, but on the same chapter. If, say, for example, it wasn't locked, and if you go, there are 2 points to this. Okay, number one is that if you are collaborating with another person, it will warn you, like when you go, let's put it this way, when you get up in the air, this would be a bummer, this would be problematic for the writer, but when you get up in the air and it's like, hey, you want to write in the chapter, it's like, whoa, hold on, like you didn't lock the chapter. So it will actually stop you from writing from that point. And the reason is because we don't want to have that somebody comes into this chapter, changes a whole bunch of stuff, and then now you don't know whose is whose. Okay. That's a system I think that we can improve even greater in the future, where we can start to really market. And I think the version history will help in kind of figuring out who did what, when, where. However, though, right now the precautionary system is that it won't let you write because you didn't protect that chapter. And so we can't guarantee that you don't have two systems kind of coming in and messing something up at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you see that in code where people are developers are working on the same piece of code, and then they both go to check it into their version control system, and there are conflicts, and then they have to basically resolve them. So it'd be like, hey, this is what you wrote, but then this other person wrote this one. Which one do you want to keep? And they got to go line by line to say, keep mine, keep his, or whatever, right?
And the key is that only happens if you're co-writing with somebody,
right?
Okay. And like I said, that was the only thing that we could really come up with that would be it's a bummer for the author that didn't lock the chapters. But it's better than not locking it and then finding this scrambled egg of word writing where this person made this change and then you also made that change, but then you deleted. Which one do you and all of a sudden you almost have to start from scratch on that chapter. So it's a little bit of a protectionary.
I don't think it happens that often. I think if you're co-writing, usually you have a good understanding with your co-writer about what you're working on, what they're working on. And if you're editing, then, the editor is going there and doing their edits, and you're usually, letting them do that and not doing stuff at the same time. You had mentioned earlier about sort of bringing in those collaborators and then, I guess, kicking them out again, right? So there's you I suppose have a system where it's like I can, let's say, invite my editor, and that'll if I do that, do they need to have purchase Atticus, or are they going to get access to it?
At this time, the editor would need to own Atticus, and it would show. So let's say, for example, the writer and the editor, they both have Atticus, and the writer sends the invite for the editor to join, okay? The editor can do that, and there will be a special place where the editor can go to see all the books that they're currently working on in editor mode, okay? So it's not like there's this hodgepodge of, wait, where's this book or what? They have one screen they can go to see all of their editing books. Now, at this time, the editor would need to own Atticus. However, though, one of the things we're working on coming out with, and I can't say exactly when, I would be shocked if it's not by the end of this year, 2025. My programming team and my head of product always hates when I put a date because then he gets really angry at me. So I'm trying not to, but I'm trying to let people know it's not like way distant. We want to create a free version for the editors and the beta readers, and so that way, if an author says, "Hey, I'd like you to work on this on Atticus," and the editor doesn't have it, they get like this free editor account that only allows them to do editing, but they can also do all of their editing with other authors on the same system. So they can choose the book, work within it, do their thing. And then what's great about it, and this is my favorite thing, is two things. Number one is that as an author, because I do that system, I don't have version control issues, okay? There's not this, and I don't know about you guys, right? We talked about it, but there's the final, all caps final, right? There's none of those anymore. The second thing is that to the editor, when they see this, it's going to feel just like Word, where there's the track changes and the comments. It's not, editors don't need to learn a new system. And what's great is they can either download it on their computer or they could access on a web browser. So long as they got a computer, they'll be able to access and work on the project itself, and they can do their edits. Another great thing about this too is that because there's no copies floating around on the internet, there's a lot less chance of it being pirated or being lost, or somebody, taking the book and uploading or gifting it to somebody and that somebody does something. It's all controlled within Atticus. So, and what's beautiful about this too is in the end, let's say you worked with an editor and you had all these, beta readers or ARC readers, you had all these people that were doing things, okay? When the time comes, you can look at the entire list of people you gave access to, and you can just click remove, 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 and then they're all removed. Now you know without a doubt that nobody out there has access to your book, and that your book was never placed in some file that could be easily transported or served up on the internet. And that's just one extra layer of protection that I think is really important. I've had times where I worried that maybe one of my copies got out there. Because I found something that says that looked like one of my old edits, that I found somehow turned into EPUB form and put out there. But now we as authors we have a list of who we've worked with. We have this quick ability to be able to remove it, and I think that's really important. So that's one of those key features inside of the collaboration component that I think will make the lives of authors easier. And although right now, if an editor owns it, they can do these things. But in the future, we want to make it so that, editors, collaborators, ARC readers, beta readers can all use the program without having to pay for it.
So when you invite somebody as a collaborator, can you give them certain levels of permission so that they're only allowed to do certain things? Like, for example, you might want them to have read-only access if they're an ARC reader or a beta reader, whereas for an editor, you want them to be able to edit. And maybe you don't want any of them to be able to export their own versions of it.
Right. So what we do is we lock export on all. That is one thing that maybe an editor might not like, because some editors do like to print off, which, it's not many, but there are some that really like to print off and then do all the editing and then go back I don't know why, but maybe it's just a paper thing in their hand. I get that. But we cut that off because what we didn't want to do is, people distributing copies or copies being lost and things like that. However, though, what you do is you choose an editor. And an editor, you are giving them access to do track changes. Now, what's beautiful about the track changes and comments is that it doesn't affect your book until you accept it. So your book isn't riddled with these things, okay? Your book is almost in two versions. There's collaboration mode and there's real mode. Real mode is the real book. If you're in collaborating with an editor and you haven't accepted any track changes and you go to hit export, it exports the real book without the track changes, okay? Or the suggestions or the content. All of that's right there. So everything is handled right there and it goes live to your real book when you've accepted them, okay? With regards to the permissions, again, like with editor, clearly, they have to have track change, they have to have comment, and it doesn't affect your book. With the ARC readers, we do have certain permissions. There will be more, because one of the things I do want to create is more permissions and a little bit of more ability to control what people can and can't do. But for the time being, we have it where the ARC readers / beta readers, they get to leave comments only. So they can highlight a section and they can leave a comment about it, okay? In the future, I want to create one where there's a switch in the permissions so that you would select ARC reader, okay, or beta reader. And then you could click a button that makes it where other ARC readers can't see the comments of other ARC readers.
Oh,
so sorry, I've got a little bit of a cold. Some authors don't want the ARC readers or beta readers to see the other comments, and some do. And the reason why I've heard from others on this, because I've never really been partial about it. I've always used Google Docs before this feature came out. The reason why is because some authors have said that when one comment comes in, a lot of times it might change the opinion of the other readers, and the other readers start to think that's a problem, whereas it wouldn't have been if that one person hadn't have said it.
Yes.
And so now all of a sudden an author is making changes to something that they really didn't necessarily need to change. But if, say, for example, you see out of your 10 ARC reader or beta readers, 1 or 7 of them all made the same comment, and clearly you need to do something, because in a vacuum, 7 out of 10 thought that was a problem. That's a problem. So we do want to create kind of customizations to the permissions given, so that in this particular case, you can kind of control things. Same thing too with like co-writing. We believe that there's certain things that need to be done in there where a co-writer can and can't do certain things, or you can only they can only create new chapters. They can't change any chapters. There's all these things that we can give as more permissions in the future that make authors have even more control of what people can and can't do inside of their project.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. We run a beta service here, and that they can't see. They get the book, they fill out a sort of questionnaire about questions specifically that the author has created, saying, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And one thing I always say to people is, we don't even let an author only book one beta reader, because it doesn't make sense. If you just have one person's opinion, you never know whether or not their issue with the book was some personal thing that they had. It's, you know, you need to see at least a few people to know whether or not that's a common issue. You know, everyone's sort of complaining about that, and that's when you know it's time to maybe look at that to change it. Whereas, you know, you can ignore things that are like, yeah, I really agree with that. Nobody else felt that way, so you know, that's one thing I'm just going to leave, right? So yeah.
Well, and one of the cool things too is that with this system, an author can also have leading questions inside the chapter for people to reply to. So, you know, the author can point inside of this chapter for, hey, what were your thoughts about my character doing X? Or you can also pre-posit certain questions of, do you think that, you know, that this scene is a little too scary for my 12-year-old, you know, audience? Like, you can create these pre-exempting comments, and then people can reply to it specifically, and now you can direct a little bit of the efforts. If there's anything you're worried about, you know, if you think it's going to be problematic, you can direct that, and I think that makes it kind of a more focused. One thing I have noticed though, and again, this is I'm sure you guys have seen something like this, or you could otherwise, is that I've seen where when authors get a little bit too much on trying to direct the questions inside of the chapters themselves, it almost mitigates the effort from the ARC readers to feel like they should post comments on things that they got hung up on. Because then it just becomes, okay, I read the chapter, now I answer these questions. Now I read this chapter, now I just answer these questions. So I do give a little bit of a cautionary tale there, but that's up to the author.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to do it, and one of them is, you know, that whole idea of just don't ask anything, just here's the book and, you know, what do you think, right? But sometimes it's helpful to, that's why I always say give open-ended questions as well, like, you know, were there any big issues with the story, the characters, whatever, not just specifically, you know, did you think this was a good ending, or, you know,
don't lead them
don't
lead them in the question.
Okay,
how so great did you love this character?
How amazing on a scale of so okay, we've talked about the writing, the editing, so, and the collaborating, and it's online and it's offline. The only thing we haven't really touched on is sort of the formatting. So I guess that is one of the key things, because that was sort of what you came out with first, right? Is sort of the answer to Vellum. I assume it's all the sort of same things where you can create all sorts of fanciness, add some graphics in if you want to, with your headers and your chapters and all that stuff, and it's all kind of like a drag and drop template kind of interface. Is that how it works?
Yeah, exactly. Matter of fact, Vellum, you know, it's for those that own Vellum and continue Vellum. It's Atticus being created has probably been a great thing for them, because since Atticus was created, Vellum's definitely come out with a lot more features than they were in the past. So, you know, to all the Vellum users, you know, yeehaw, like that's
you're welcome.
You know, competition is a great thing for the market. You know, when they could be when you don't have competition, you have things like Amazon's doing, you know, where they're just militant and they're just, you know, doing whatever they want. So honestly, it really comes down. There's a lot of back and forth on feature creation and things like that. Vellum's a great program. It's beautiful. You know, the creators of Vellum, great guys. They work really hard on it. So, and again, like I said, it's, you know, it's $100 more expensive and it only works on Mac. You don't have the ability to, you know, work on different computers or anything like that. And, you know, there's back and forth on, like, it can do this a little bit, you know, and Atticus can do this. So really, when you look at the two programs, if you're just looking at formatting alone, you know, that's great. And if you're sticking with just formatting, you know, it can definitely be a great answer. Where I see kind of Atticus is that Atticus can be the place where you write, collaborate, and format your book. And then those little nuances between the two, I don't really think play too much into that. Also, too, we have major plans to, you know, again, add beyond just the formatting, but also, you know, to the writing process, more collaboration capabilities, authors being able to, my absolute dream with Atticus and where we're truly building towards is I'd like to think of Atticus as an author's and publisher's book management system. You know, imagine, and again, we're going to get here, but imagine a publisher can look at one screen and see all 7 of their current books They can see where those books are. You know, the authors are 65%, their word count, their changes. They can then bring in their editor, you know, tag the editor in, remove the editor out, bring it in, you know, somebody to work the formatting of the book, you know, and never have to like, you know, pick up the phone and be like, hey, how's that book coming along? Hey, okay, I'm going to have the editor join in. Okay, let me send an email. Okay, editor, here's the file. And now they're doing all this file management, you know, version control, and, you know, they're herding cats. Imagine just one system, okay, that the author can go in, quickly update an old book, hit export. They can work with a couple of writers. They could have their editor tag in. They can manage their entire writing process all the way up to publication in one spot. And same thing with publishers. Publishers can see every project that's going on at the same time, and they can coordinate and orchestrate, you know, with efficiency. That's really where this will get to. And that's why I think it's going to be incredibly fun for not just the individual authors, not just the editors, you know, the beta readers, but also for the publishing companies from small to big.
I think that sounds amazing.
Yeah. So if you were to add somebody as a collaborator, whatever sort of collaborator, do they get a notification, like an email that says they've been added, or is it just in their Atticus that says a new book shows up and says you're a beta reader of this book or something?
Yeah, so what would happen is that, let's say I give permission to a beta reader, okay, and I send them, I put in their email address, and I click send. What it will do is it will send an email to that beta reader saying, hey, you've been selected by so-and-so to work on this project, you know, click the link to accept. And if they decide not to, you know, then okay, then it's not like your book's just sitting in there. Now it will show that your request in where you look at the authors, right, you know, or the collaborators, okay, it will show that there was an offer pending, but it hasn't been accepted. You can always cancel it. So that way the link doesn't work anymore, okay? But once they click that and they accept it, you know, it will ask them to log into their Atticus currently, okay? So currently it would be, and if they were like, oh no, I don't have an Atticus, then, you know, okay, you can purchase it if you want to. That's for now. However, though, in the future, when we have it where they can create a, when they can create a free account, okay, just for that capability, which is to be a beta reader or to be an editor, they'll say, hey, you know, the email, they'll click the link, the email, the website will come up and it'll say, okay, do you own Atticus already, or would you like a free, you know, beta reader account? And in this case, I can select, okay, I own it, so let me type it in, or I want a free account. And the free account will basically be where they can't create books, they can't write, they can't format, but they'll see their dashboard that has that book that they're to work on. They can open it up and will only show them the capabilities of being whatever it is, an editor or a beta reader. Now, what's really cool is, let's say, for example, John Smith sent this beta reader access to be a beta reader for his book. And they set up an account, a free account, okay? And then 2 months later, Susie Q sends editor ability to this, who was a beta reader. They don't need to create a new account. They can go into editing, they can go into beta reading, and they can look at all the books that they currently have within, and they can operate. The only time that they would have to pay for Atticus at that point is if they want to write their own books or format their own books or that sort of thing. So this allows people, you know, to not have to buy us or anything like that if they want to work with authors. We think that that will make it much easier and better. In the future, you know, if you want to be a freelance writer or a freelancer, you know, you want to be an editor, you want to be a beta reader, like, you'll clearly want to use the system, because the more authors that are using it, the more requests to use the system, you know, to make it easier on the author is going to be key. And so taking away that whole, okay, but if you want to work with Atticus writers, you have to pay us. I don't want to do that. So in all honesty, it's really that next capability we'll be coming out with and making it free for the editors and the beta readers. They'll just be able to only do those things. That's it.
I think that's a really smart move. Yeah, especially with beta readers. I mean, editors, I can see there's value for them to have a copy, but for a beta reader, you know, generally they're not going to go want to spend, you know, $150 to buy a system so that they can beta read your book. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yep, and like I said, if we make it super easy for beta readers to have an account and be able to use it on whatever computer they have, and it's free, that makes it so much easier on the writer. I mean, the writer can, you know, more beta readers are totally ready for that program, no problem. And again, it puts the power back in the author. where the author can then see everybody who has access. The access to that book is controlled. It's not going to spread, on the internet. And then when that person's done, I can, again, it's my favorite feature, but just hitting remove. And now I know nobody has access to my book anymore. I'm ready to move into formatting. Done. And that's just, to me, that's just key.
That sounds great. That sounds like the perfect place to kind of wrap this up, because unfortunately we're close to the top of the hour. But what a fascinating deep dive this has been. I've been looking for something like Scrivener that's on PC for years, and all of what you have just pitched to me is like so much more than what I was looking for. So I'm really excited to hear all about it.
Yeah, and like I said, it's I think we've really hit where Vellum is. I think we've got more to do where we can surpass Google Docs. And I think we've got more to surpass Scrivener. And again, Scrivener is one of those where it'll be really hard to make sure we have capabilities, but we hit that click and that brain calorie. But the key is that one day will truly be the statement, which again was the dream for the beginning, is if Scrivener, Google Docs, and Vellum got together and they had a baby, his name would be Atticus. And so I'm going to continue to strive and drive to make it where authors get all the benefits from that. And again, you don't have to pay for those as those things come out. We're just going to continue to make it better, make it more robust, but maintain its simplicity and its ease.
That sounds amazing. So, Craig, do you have any final questions before we ask Dave to tell our listeners and viewers where they can find out more about Atticus?
No, I think we've covered everything, but like I said, this is something that I think is really, really useful. I used to use Scrivener as well. It was useful, but it is a very difficult thing to use, and I'm sure, like you, I never scratched the surface of it. And I had a MacBook, so I used to use Vellum, all this stuff. And it's just so much easier if everything is I've always felt for everything that everything is in one place. And so I think it's amazing that you've brought it all together in that. And so I look forward to hearing from you again in the future on further changes you've made or new products that you guys come up with, because you're always coming up with the best things out there for authors and self-publishers. So thanks again for coming on today, Dave.
Absolutely, Craig. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, well, thank you so much. So Dave, where can everyone find out more about Atticus? Where can they learn more?
Yeah, you can find it at atticus.io, which, by the way, the name of the company was made after Atticus Finch, one of my favorite books, To Kill a Mockingbird. So figured, having that wonderful literature be the title of it. So you can find it at atticus.io. Or also, too, if there's any questions that anyone has from this or so, if you can find me on kindlepreneur.com. I have a contact me page you can find in the footer. Hit me up with any questions. I still answer all those questions that come in. So if you heard something, you're like, wait a second, or you have a concern or question or anything like that, I'm there to answer.
Well, that is fantastic. Thank you so much, Dave, for taking the time and giving us this really deep dive. I think people are going to get a lot out of it. And so if you have got a lot out of it, then be sure to leave Dave a comment down below. You can scroll down, you can see the description, and we'll put a link where you can find out more about Atticus. There is that big empty comment section. So leave a comment for Dave. Let him know whether you're excited about Atticus, what system you're using at the moment, what the biggest challenges that you have as an author trying to write your book, because we love to read all those comments. And while you're down there, there's also that like button, the subscribe button, that little bell icon. If you click that, you'll be notified every time there is a new episode of Fully Booked. And of course, there will be a new episode of Fully Booked, same time, same channel next week. So until then, cheerio.